From Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of my colleagues seem to betray no understanding at all of what federal telework policy is. To say that the workforce is not going to the office and it's time to get back to work simply suggests they don't know that every agency, every commission, every department makes its own decisions about this as part of the complete workplace policy, going job classification by job classification, defining when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense. That's the way that it works. But they want to have a broad brush, one-size-fits-all straitjacket policy where they just decapitate a decade of progress using the pandemic or the end of the pandemic as the excuse for doing that. To repeat, this is not a Washington problem. The vast majority of the federal workforce is spread out across the country. The hardworking people we see in front of us today who work for the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives and for the House are just a small example of the workforce located in Washington, which is a tiny minority of the federal workforce, which is all over America. So that flexibility has been given to federal workforce supervisors all over the country to deal with. And they would clearly try to elevate what I think is a frivolous talking point over the cost savings that have been created because of telework policy. They would elevate it over the increased job performance and job satisfaction that is being demonstrated in studies around the country, and they would elevate it over the clear success of telework within the private sector. Oftentimes my colleagues will say, well, we've got to be more like the private sector. Well, it's the private sector that's been leading the way here. The federal workforce has been very much in the rear guard doing it. But in any event, remember that they're conflating two completely different things. One is the federal telework policy that has evolved over the last decade, and the other is the pandemic. And it's true that the pandemic response was made far more efficient because there was an infrastructure in place in order to make telework possible. But those pandemic policies can be reversed without destroying all of the policies that have developed over the last decade. And there are an incredible number of unintended consequences that are exacerbated by the fact we have not had a single hearing on this question, which is of fundamental importance